Welcome to a cultured discussion. This is our quarterly event where we discuss all things culture. The topic of our discussion today is maintaining a strong company culture in a time of disruption. For those of you that I've not yet met, I'm Gabrielle Harris, Managing Director and founder of Interchange, a management consultancy that creatively transforms organisations. We support our clients with aligning their purpose, strategy, and culture, but we do it with a twist. We deliver solutions in some of the most immersive and colourful ways, ones that allow us to truly connect with our audiences and inspire positive change. I'm joined today by an impressive panel of leaders at the forefront of change. Bunnings Managing Director, Mike Schneider. A household name and hardware chain, Bunnings now has over 380 stores across Australia and New Zealand, as well as a fast-growing e-commerce presence. Bunnings was recently named Australia's most trusted brand, thanks to its innovation and connections between consumer and retailer. CSIRO's Executive Director of People, Katherine Paroz. CSIRO is Australia's national science agency, formed to solve some of the greatest challenges through innovative science and technology, and of course is pivotal to us finding a way out of this pandemic that we currently find ourselves in. And WesTrac's CFO, Fewster. Seven Group Holdings owned Westtrack is one of the largest authorised CAT equipment dealers in the world, providing customers with a wide range of machinery and construction equipment. Welcome, Mike, Katherine, and Steve, and thank you for being a part of this discussion today. Why are we even talking about disruption today anyway, and its impact on culture? Well, philosophically, I'd argue that the word disruption has been rolling around in the business community for the best part of the last decade. It's referenced largely, in my view, in relation to the next industrial revolution, digitisation. COVID-19 has in many ways fast-tracked that revolution. E-commerce advancements that would have taken years outside of this pandemic are now taking months. Retail e-commerce is predicted to double this year, and the previous doubling took over 7 years. Organisational change overall is happening at light speed, not because it was a part of a preordained strategy, rather in order to survive. In some ways, I think that survival's actually been quite good because it's given us a key focus, if you like, a purpose, which has brought about some level of, I guess, connection and engagement. And that clear sense of purpose, albeit short term, has actually galvanised workforces. However, in other ways, the disruption that COVID-19 has thrown at us has been detrimental in the way that we as people and indeed companies are feeling. Company culture is such a fragile and challenging thing to mould. It becomes more challenging when everyone's working away from one another and we don't have that physical presence. It would be a no surprise to anyone that we've chosen Are You OK Day to have this conversation about company culture and its impact on employee wellbeing. However, there are so many ingredients to culture, and today is all about exploring the importance of culture and how to maintain it as we move through uncertainty and change. So, Mike, Katherine, Steve, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us.
So I've got a range of questions, some of them that I'd love to hear all of your perspectives on, and others that I think we'll just organically find our way through this conversation. But I thought I would start with you, Katherine, given that I know that you've been involved in a whole range of organisations in working on culture. And I was curious to first learn from you about how has your organisation's culture helped you to navigate through this time of disruption?
Thanks, Gabe. Well, I feel very fortunate to be at CSIRO and working in the people space at a time like this, and to be working with an organisation that's really part of the solution. And I think that permeates our culture. So I've been at CSIRO for a year now, and what I found there is that it's an organisation whose culture is dedicated and driven by the greater good. And so that's really real and tangible for us. I think people become scientists and are attracted to working at an organisation like ours because they want to do something. They really want to do something for others, and they want to change the world. And so that has been an enormous boost to our resilience and our ability to manage our people through this, is that disposition. It's a real strength of our culture. Our people are very motivated to help. And they're also, as scientists, they're willing to experiment with things. So we have this, sometimes we don't love that as part of a culture, when they try funky things that don't work. But I think through the pandemic, when we've been able to challenge them with how to get things done in a different way, innovate processes, transition to working from home, that real adaptability and ability to experiment and try things in a new way, and being very open to that, has been a real strength for us and helped us think about different ways to do things in this new context.
It must be an interesting place to play at CSIRO, where there is such a strong connection to purpose around what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. I'm sure that that's a key contributor to, I guess, having that galvanizing force as you start to think about how you get through this rocky period.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting in the context of having worked at other places as well. And often the work that you do in HR teams is helping an organisation have clarity about its purpose. At CSIRO, they have absolute clarity about their purpose in the Australian system and their role to help use science and technology to solve these big problems like drought and bushfires and pandemics. And so they have absolute clarity about their purpose, which is strengthening for the culture.
Steve, what are your thoughts on this? So how has Westtrack been able to use culture to help you to navigate through this period?
I think one of the great things about WesTrac is the passion that our people have for the business and for the product. If you think about the classic V8 supercars, Ford versus Holden, our business and the people in our business is very much attached to our product. So they're always looking for ways to ensure our product is successful and our customers' use of the product is, again, also successful. So very, very customer driven, customer focused organisation. And we do have people similar to CSIRO. We have mechanics who are naturally problem solvers, and we have engineers that are naturally problem solvers. And then you've got bean counters sitting in the background telling up how well we're doing financially. But we've got a whole raft of people who are actually, they are naturally problem solvers. And I think whilst we have had some disruption with the pandemic, or there's other factors across the industry that might be changing the way we do things, I think the passion that our people have for the business and that desire to the business is successful has certainly been one of the key contributors for our ability to continue to operate and serve our customers through the last 6 months. But I think it's that passion for the product.
What are your thoughts on this one, Mike? I think Bunnings has been pretty public in the media around, I guess, how strong the culture has been holding up over this period. How have you been focusing on the cultural piece to be able to support your people moving through this period?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one for us. Our team very much have been, on the front line, as all healthcare workers, retail workers, police, fire, ambulance, out in front of the broader community. And I think for us, for our store-based team members, the culture that we've always sort of focused on is a very genuine and inclusive culture. We have a mindset that people come to Bunnings, put down roots and grow a great career. But, at the onset of the pandemic, one of the things that we were able to see through the range of ways we communicate and connect and engage with our team was a real sense of fear. So part of, what we needed to tackle was a move from fear to unity, if you like, and a real sense of purpose behind that and direction. And we really galvanized the team around a focus on being open, being available for the community to access products, whether it was to set up a home office, a home classroom, or just stay occupied through, the varying degrees of what we've been going through. And now, particularly for our Melbourne team, which is where our national support team is, it's really about driving the culture to support the resilience that's needed personally and professionally to manage work, manage family connections. And we recognise that, right across our network, we've been very fortunate that right through the pandemic, our team have been able to work, continue to do so. But many in their households haven't. So it's been using the power, engagement and connection of our culture to give our team a real sense of solid ground. When you're at Bunnings, you're on solid ground, you're being paid, you're being looked after, because there's so much other uncertainty. So I think for us, it's been a very unifying period of time, and it really has lent into key areas of our sort of leadership framework, particularly around teamwork, integrity and respect.
I really like that, Mike, the unifying piece, because we certainly had that as well. But we also then recognise that there are different groups of people within our workforce that we had to also treat differently, whether they had people in their family that were health professionals. So how do we make sure we don't put them at risk? There'll be people with elderly parents that live with them. So we had that unity, but then we also understood there were subsets, and how do we look after those subsets as well?
Yeah, it is an important point, and I think what really strikes me in what you're saying is a similar mindset for us, which is that we sort of internally sort of refer to Bunnings as the Red Army, given our uniforms, but it's not a homogenous unit, and there's lots of different things going on. If you're a team member at Bunnings who's over 70, and we've got plenty of those because a lot of our workforce is aged over 50, and you're based in Melbourne, we're paying you to stay home because we think that's the safest place for you. But we've also got team from our support functions who we've written work permits for that they can go to the office purely because it gets them away from a domestic environment that isn't safe or isn't secure. So it is understanding that. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Mike, while I've got you, you mentioned that concept of people knew that when they're at Bunnings, they're standing on solid ground. But of course, we've changed the ground that they're standing on simply by the fact that, at least in a Victorian context, those stores have been closed. What are some of the things that you've learnt about the culture by not having people physically in the same environment?
Certainly, we've learnt the importance of connection and the importance of really strong communication. So right from the outset of the pandemic, we've really worked hard to engage our team in a lot of different ways, and we've certainly seen other organisations doing the same. We run the enterprise social media platform Workplace, which is a Facebook product, and we've used that as a way of sharing very, very quickly with the team information. What we've realised is that the most important thing our team are looking for after feeling safe is having context about what's going on and what it means for us. So I think right back to late March when the announcements were coming through, I think it was a Sunday afternoon, we had a crisis committee meeting in our boardroom in Hawthorn, and we got together, and the very next thing we did was cut a video and post it straight to Workplace. And within hours there were hundreds of comments on there from our team with plenty of questions, plenty of concerns, but a really strong acknowledgement that knowing what was going on from a Bunnings point of view, and knowing that we were working hard to help interpret what it was going to mean for business and for our social liberties, was a very reassuring thing for them. So we've worked hard to create that. We listened hard to the team through that fear phase. There was a lot of fear about what this was going to mean, and a lot of the the really good safety measures we've got in place came from our store teams because they were living the environment. And I think it's things like that have sped up the cadence of connection and sped up the cadence of communication. And we've worked really hard through these last few months to try and find the right rhythm of that communication. So there's this constant engagement and a bit of fun as well. You know, we've run campaigns to raise money for community groups through that. We've done things to bring our team closer. So for me, you know, very much around that has been the mindset of the business.
Katherine, what are your thoughts on this? I imagine with scientists that are going out into the field typically to do research and collect things, not to mention those that are bound to the CSIRO typical environment. What has this meant for your culture over this period? What have you learnt about the culture?
Yeah, we've learned a couple of things. I think linking to Mike's earlier point and Stephen's about diversity. So we understood, of course, we all have very diverse needs and individuals and arrangements for people across our organisation. But I think we really learnt even more the depths of our diversity and the different needs that our people have, which is a great strength of the culture. And I think in crisis also means how you think carefully about each of those cohorts. And for CSIRO, we have more people, probably more than our fair share of people that live alone. And it's a bit of the nature of the work and the type of temperament and personality. And so we've done quite a bit of work in engaging in those people that are living alone, and coffee roulette and a whole range of different things to try and connect those people. And I think particularly in Victoria, that's our group that have found this the most difficult. So we've learned a lot about our diversity and the way that our people live. We've learned a lot about how they like to communicate. So we have, similarly to Bunnings, we've really ramped up our cadence on communication and regular meetings and talking about issues and sharing experiences and having some fun as well. Because what really resonates in our culture is the deep science. And so we have been running sessions largely about the pandemic, but our people really want to understand the deep science around the vaccine and how it's working and the technology that's being used. And so we've been running these sessions that people can just come and hear about the work that's being done. And I think that's helped develop an enormous sense of pride, even for the people that are not even in, don't even work in that field, but they feel very proud, and that's been a good thing. And it also, that's their way of engaging with this pandemic, which is not all of us engage in that way. So I think they're two areas that we've learned a lot about, together with the adaptiveness and for those that are usually in the field, for those mostly that are in labs, how can they get some of that work done at home? It's forced us to really accelerate our science of the future. So how will we use giant computing power and different ways of doing science that's typically done in labs? What does a lab of the future look like? And so we've done some great work accelerating that, which is really exciting for our people. So there's some of the things we've learned along the way.
And Katherine, how did you go about collecting, some of those insights that you've just shared about having quite a lot of people in the organisation living alone? How did you collect that information to be able to support you and the team to think about some ways to circumvent the challenges that they're facing?
Yeah, so initially, we have a level of data, certainly not about living arrangements, but we identified quite early on. So in the first lockdown, as we went into the first lockdown as a country, we identified who could be at-risk cohorts, people living alone. Mike mentioned domestic violence, a whole range of different people with disabilities, non-English speaking backgrounds. We have a lot of visiting scientists. So we've have people here who don't have their families here, who came to Australia for 3 months on assignment and are still here. So we've got and students that are doing PhDs working with us and who have not been able to return to China. or Europe. So we've got these other special groups that we've been looking after during this period, but identifying those cohorts and then working very closely with their line leaders. And that's where we've really got the feedback, particularly about people feeling isolated and living at home, as line leaders have been digging into how can they help their people. So that's really how we've created this two-way. And people are quite forthright in our organisation as well to say, you know, I live by myself and I'm struggling. And we've found people, despite sort of a lot of introversion, as the pandemic's progressed, they might not have said something initially, but now they definitely are saying, I need these are some of the things that I need, and I need some help. And I think, as you say, on Are You OK Day, trying to flush that out and encourage that, talking about things as much as we can.
Mike said earlier to me when we were in the green room that, you know, this would probably be one of the first Are You OK days where the answer is probably no more often than it is yes right now. So it is such an important time to be thinking about and talking about these things. Steve, I know that WesTrac's done quite a lot of work, very dedicated on culture and making sure that you clearly understand what it is and how to use it. How have you tapped into that over this period?
Just to pick up on what Katherine said and getting line leaders to engage with their teams, we certainly have been over the last couple of years on a journey to reshape our culture. Our people weren't particularly engaged, and our engagement scores are now immensely better than what they were. But through that program, what we've done is we're building a deeper connection or an understanding of the people that are within our team, so that when things like the pandemic arise, we don't have the data, because we're not going to collect the data in our HR systems and place people into little boxes that we can run some AI over the top of and whatnot. It's through those conversations. So I think the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years has really prepped us well to have leaders that now that have that empathy and a connection with their people. So when these things occur, we're much better placed to understand how individually they are going to respond, what some of their living arrangements may be. So we were pretty quickly able to form a view through that line leadership group of what we need to do. And that also then gave us, from a comms perspective, we used the videos, we had chat sessions with the CEO and a bunch of other comms tools. But that upward comms is all great, us telling us, directing the comms down. We needed that feedback loop. So having that shift in the culture where there's a lot more trust to be able to show those your individual circumstances with your leader, that gave that whole circle dynamic a much, much more powerful and a much quicker time, which allowed us to respond. I'll throw the cliche out there, far more agilely, if that's a word, we were much more agile through the last 6 months than what we may have been 2 years ago.
Yeah, right. So I've heard from all three of you around how important comms has been as a part of this, with a dispersed workforce, making sure that you're always, I guess, got your finger on the pulse for getting messaging out straight away. Mike, I know often for you, when there were the times that press conference happened, you were instantly within the next hour making a quick video to send to 48,000 people going, I don't know yet, but as soon as I do know, we'll get back to you and we'll have plans around that. So that comms element has been pivotal, and it's of course no surprise, I'm sure, to anybody here or watching this conversation, that the reason why we really wanted the three of you to be a part of this discussion today is to actually hear from you about some of the things that you have done to maintain the culture over this period, because a lot of organizations are feeling that their culture is not going so well, and that they're really struggling to get a handle on it. So Steve, in addition to that comms piece, what are the other things that you have been doing to perhaps even strengthen your culture over this period?
Certainly spent a lot more time having those personal conversations. So you still need to run and operate your business, but making sure you're staying really connected with your teams. And then as you sort of go through the layers, make sure that connection's still staying. I come back to, you need that feedback loop really quickly. If things aren't tracking as you would like them to be, then making sure that you can address them really quickly. We've got a crisis management process that we enacted, and that was, we had the leadership group that was doing a lot of the strategic work, and then we had some of our line leaders that were doing much more of the tactical work, and making sure those two functions were operating well. But again, unless you've got that culture where there's that trust and support for the people, those functions may not be as effective if we're not getting that feedback loop and that trust, and people believe that the exec are certainly there to look after them and protect them. And we were very clear from the outset around what the three tenets or the three objectives were for us to be successful. We're very clear with communicating those, and they were very aligned to our values. It was around protect our people, protect our business, and protect our customers. And our values around safety, pride, accountability, respect, and customer were certainly embraced in that objective as we worked through. And so our behaviours through the last 6 months were very much aligned with everything we've been saying over the last 2 years. So I think from my perspective, we've actually done a really good job of strengthening the culture. And it's not, oh, here's something that we say we do when the times are good, but when there is a challenge in front of us, we're still behaving exactly the same way. So I think for us, it's been a really good opportunity to strengthen and improve the culture. Will withstand the good times as well as some of those challenging times.
Right, so it's about the work that you've done to date and how you consistently show that doesn't change no matter the pressure that's put on the business.
Yeah, the values are important to us irrespective of the situation.
And Mike, you talked before about bringing a sense of fun into this period. Have you got some examples of how you've gone about that and how that's really helped you to strengthen or maintain your culture over this period?
Yeah, I think, picking up on Steve's point, I think organisationally, you've got to have a mindset you want to do things. And, it's clear listening to Steve talk that's, very much the mindset within the organisation. And I think it's the same at Bunnings. So we really want to do things for the team. We've got a really long track record in our business of doing that over, not just the last 2 or 3 years, but 2.5 decades, strong reward and recognition, strong engagement, and yet things have stopped, right? Like we can't do the barbecues, and they're slowly coming back into parts of Australia and New Zealand now, which is great, but closed down a lot of the things that, were very unique to the operating model and gave the team, a sort of a serendipitous element of fun because they were good things to do, going out into the community, bringing community groups into the store, seeing kids running around in playgrounds, all those sorts of things. They've all been parked by the wayside. So, it takes a strong degree of discipline to sort of say, well, what is it we're going to do and why? And then every now and then something else will just pop up. And we were doing a live stream to the team, and it was being hosted by one of our comms team, and a team member from one of our Melbourne warehouses, Victorian warehouses, messaged in and said, I don't know whether this is really live. If it's really live, can Mike drop and give us 10 push-ups, which I staggered my way through. But it kicked off an idea of setting challenges for the team and sharing those. And in doing so, we put money aside, and the winning teams would be able to nominate charities to donate that to in their local areas, which fits culturally with what we've always wanted to do from a community point of view. And it gave everyone a bit of fun. So, we had the push-up challenge, we had a dancing challenge, we've had singing challenges, all sorts of things. And more recently, We ran a weekend activity called Fire Up the Barbecue. We put tags and things on our social media platforms so everyone could see it. You've got this really lovely window into so many people's lives. You saw kids and family and pets and all sorts of things. So, really lovely ways to sort of lean into the sort of behaviours that we have. We've continued to recognise and reward the team. And I think importantly, we also got on with the business of developing our strategic agenda for the year ahead. We got on with the process of interrogating, our leadership frameworks and strategic frameworks, because I also think it's just as important to get on with the normality rather than sort of, get mired in, this is crisis management. We went from crisis management to what I call an interim normal. It's not a new normal, it's an interim normal, I think. And what the normal looks like after that will be interesting. And for us now, we're in this really unique position where, the analogy that I've been using is it's like watching an Olympic 1500 metre swimming race, because we've got eight operational regions across Australia and New Zealand, and there's 8 lanes in a swimming pool. And right now, WA are doing a Kieran Perkins and Victoria are still in the locker room trying to find their swimmers. And it's right across that we've got to be able to run from really challenging circumstances through to business pretty much as usual. And that's why getting that work done on the normal part of the business was so important, but not letting go of the cultural side, because that's brought the team on the journey and checking in. We've done pulse surveys, we've done our culture surveys to just make sure that the team are telling us what else is on their mind or giving us guidance on what will help them feel better.
Thanks, Mike. We've had one of our participants say that they're also not sure that this is live, and will you give a little dance to demonstrate that it is indeed?
Not a chance for that, Gabe, not a chance. We're live.
Catherine, what are some examples that you've seen at CSIRO in relation to, I guess, that strengthening of culture over this period?
Yeah, I think that one thing that we've got much better at during this period is listening. And so whilst we're good at communications, I think we've been good at being timely and pushing information, and it's quite a content-heavy organisation and quite a sophisticated cohort in some ways. So they're big absorbers of information. For the leadership team, I think we've really grown some different muscle around listening and paying attention, and we really have 80% of our people working. We have the swim lanes as well, but really about 80% of our people working at home at the moment. And so listening to what they need and how they're feeling has been really important. And particularly in Victoria, every Friday in Victoria, we've got about 1,800 people in Victoria. We just open up WebEx forums with senior leaders, and there's no content. We're not delivering messages. We're just listening so they can talk. And some of that has been quite fun and funny and lighthearted and talking about football and those things in the Victorian cohort. But some of it has been, some heartbreaking stories that people have shared, and really good insights for us in terms of what helps people. So I think listening has been a big one for us. Proof points about still getting things done. I think that lack of tangible thing, that virtual way that we're working, it sometimes feels like, is anything actually happening? And so we've gone out of our way to a bit similar to what Mike's talking about, getting some stuff done, but then also talking about how we're getting some things done. So we've very rapidly built a project to deliver furniture and IT equipment to our people that are working from home. They can order what they need so that they can be safe and have the right gear to work at home. So we've made some really quite big scientific achievements through this period, and so we're trying to get that up in lights to say business goes on, and I think we didn't do that recognition of our achievements as well in the past. So I think that one, and then one that I'm really, of course, very interested in as a people leader is transitioning people onto other work. So we absolutely have had customers that have not able to continue with projects that they're doing with us, with people that could have become underutilised as some of those projects are either cancelled or delayed for long periods. And we've surprised ourselves with our ability to quickly identify other strategic work and reassign people in a very agreeable kind of consultative way. And there's more of that to be done. But I think we wouldn't have thought we could have done that in the past, moving people across business units quickly and onto strategic work. And we've been quite siloed. So we surprised ourselves, and I think that will be a long-term strengthening of how we do things at CSIRO. So it's been great.
It's a very empathetic way of approaching, I guess, organisational design and people management, to think about how they actually might be able to add value in different spaces across the organisation as well. Now we've just got a quick poll that we're going to pop up for some audience interaction now. That'll be coming up on your screen. A very quick question that's up the top there and a few options underneath. Has your organisation's culture helped you to navigate through this time of disruption? Yes, definitely. Somewhat. No, definitely not. And it just takes a minute or two, and then the answers to that will pop up, which will be really interesting to continue our conversation. Whilst the answers to that happen, Katherine, my next question for you, I know you and I have had lots of conversations about culture and why culture is useful within organisations and why is it useful for the past 10 years. But I guess the longer that we play in this space, the more that piece around culture starts to link back to strategy. Every organisation has a strategy. They need to deliver on this. To Mike's point earlier, sticking with we've still got to get stuff done. The culture that an organisation moulds and creates is ideally in place to help to deliver on that strategy. So I'm curious to hear from you about how you know whether you've got the right culture in place at CSIRO to deliver on these strategic priorities that you have for the future.
Yes, and these are always fascinating questions. And in fact, our Larry Marshall, who's our CEO, and the leadership team, we're in the middle of doing this work actually, and thinking about our culture and how it will support our strategic aspirations going forward. And there are absolutely elements, some of which I've talked about today, that do support it. So the creativity, the willingness to experiment, the adaptiveness, and those things are things that we need to preserve and keep going with. But there are some things in our culture that won't support our ambitions going forward. And it's a 100-year-old organisation, and there are some very cemented in ideas about science and the way things that are done, and some of those things are not helpful to us, and we know will be difficult, become obstacles as we think about a really agile, flexible kind of science agency supporting Australians and Australian businesses going forward. And so I think it's getting really clear on how those impact the business outcomes that you're looking for, and then prioritising them. And I think it's a prioritisation. It's an aspect of our culture that we find difficult. So there's so many priorities all of the time. There's so much stuff and there's so much complexity. So we have to, and I think as a leadership team, we say we have to begin with ourselves prioritising so that we can be clear about the mindsets and the behaviour that are going to support us to be successful in the long term. So, and I think then creating focus on one of those two things that will have the most impact, and not being all things to all people. So that's where we are now. And I think that and this is quite interesting, I think you've got very different businesses Here, I think CSIRO will aspire to continuing to develop a very strong innovation culture, but we can't be all things. It's that classic conversation in leadership teams. We want to be customer focused, we want to be strategic, we want to be innovative, we want to be deliverers, and just getting really real about, well, we can't be all of those things. We'll do some of them really well, but at our core, what are we? And our aspiration is around innovation, and being the catalyst for that in Australia. So it's an ongoing dialogue, it's ongoing work, and navigating the lag can be hard as well. But
yeah, absolutely. And I know innovations are at the core of both Bunnings and WesTrac as well. So I'm going to jump to Mike and Steve in a minute, but just before we do that, I might just show us all those poll results and see how people are feeling about this. Interesting.
good.
85% of people feel that their culture has definitely helped them to navigate through this time of disruption. And we have 0% on a definitely not. So overall, it looks like we're tracking reasonably well on our people focus, at least. Thank you for everybody for taking part in that poll. Mike, I might just jump to you in getting your thoughts on how you know whether or not you have the right culture in place to help you to meet your strategic imperatives.
Yeah, I think Katherine made a couple of really, really important points about how do you get an organisation to sort of innovate and what do you want to focus on, and I think COVID coming along when it did has actually been good for our business. Good in the sense of we became very focused very quickly on team and customer welfare and being open and available, and everything else. It was like watching fuel rods on a space shuttle jettison away. Everything else just disappeared, and we focused on that, and that allowed us to really accelerate a number of things we wanted to do before we got back into that interim normal that I talked about earlier. But I think about Bunnings. It's another old company. It'll be 135 years old next year. Our warehouse format turned 25 a couple of years ago. And there's been some really, if I think about that last quarter century or so, there's been some really defining points. Obviously the first warehouse stores in late 1994, 2001, the company ate its largest competitor and more than doubled overnight with the BBC Hardware House acquisition in 2001. We faced a unique competitive threat, from sort of 2011, 2012, when Woolies and Lowe's in the US partnered up to try a format in Australia. And then our expedition to the UK was a really important point for the company from a cultural point of view. It was like a basketball team or a netball team or a football team that goes undefeated through a season and gets beaten in a grand final. I think for the team, not winning in the UK, was a real challenge, because it really, it probably showed us that we'd become a bit hubristic. I think we'd become very set in our ways with an operating model that, was very structured and very consistent over a long period of time. And we probably lost sight of some of the elements of culture that, I've touched on this afternoon. And it forced us to look hard at ourselves and think about where innovation, growth and evolution were going to come from. And one of those was the digital transformation that's underway in the business. And at times leading into 2020, it really felt like, we were sort of at odds with the organisation and at odds with our culture, because we were sort of trying to reject this change. And clearly, COVID's not only seen us embrace digital more than ever, it's been an enormous enabler of our ability to serve the community through this period of time and keep our team working. So that mindset has changed, and I think the culture continues to evolve because of that. I think we've reignited the innovation part of our leadership model, and I think probably not in a dissimilar way to what Katherine was describing at CSIRO. And I think that's been really important, because it's enabling and emboldening the team to want to change and to want to continue to evolve. And I think at the end of the day, you have the best strategy in the world. If you haven't got a good culture, it just won't count for anything. And I think we've seen companies the world over, collapse. And at its core, it's a toxic culture. It's a culture where people aren't welcome, aren't safe, aren't listened to, aren't understood. And I think, all of us this afternoon are talking about an incredible value that all of those things create. So for us, I think it's it's an ongoing evolution. And I think we've now given ourselves permission to evolve and actually to challenge the status quo more comfortably, and live with the outcomes of that when they deliver good outcomes for the business, and enough strength within the culture to speak up if we don't think it's right. I think that's been, the biggest positive that's come from 2020, and will set us up for a really interesting future.
Thanks, Mike. And when you talk about the digitisation piece, I find this to be incredibly interesting for a business like yours that is based around bricks and mortar and having stores that people go into. What did you need to do to be able to inspire the desire for digitisation to happen at Bunnings in a business that's been so successful in a physical presence?
And I think that success has been part of the challenge, Gabe. Like, I think, if it's not broken, don't fix it piece. I think we all have had those experiences. I think, as I said, the time, for a number of our team working in the UK, and to see a brand that had built up a really strong degree of reputation, performance, trust, take the hits that it took in 2016, 17, and ultimately at the end in 2018, I think really unsettled the team. And I think that sowed the seeds of, well, what comes next? What are we going to do next? Because we'd sort of convinced ourselves that growth was going to come through an offshore.
Regardless.
And we had to go and find some different avenues here, because, clearly, for the time being, that sort of offshore approach isn't going to be right strategically. It took a lot of convincing, because one of the things that I have learned is that, CEOs, CFOs, HR directors have an incredibly loud voice within an organization. And when you've got a number of those executives all very aligned on we will or we won't do something, starting the process of change can be hard, because you're effectively saying, well, perhaps your predecessor was wrong, or perhaps the strategy was wrong. And what we needed to do was explain why things are right for periods of time, and then you've got to find a logical and smooth way to change. And I know there'll be people from my team on today's webinar, and they'll tell you it was not easy. It was hard for all of us, because we had to overcome our conscious and unconscious bias in this area. But the transformations, selling hammers and nails and timber and paint online is a nice thing, but that's really just putting us in the same pond as every other retailer. The digital transformation of our business goes deeply into analytics. It goes deeply into supply chain. It goes deeply into human capital management systems to sort of understand what's going on, with our people. I heard Katherine talking earlier about the way that teams are learning about their people, and through this time we've come to know individual stories better, but also know just how much we don't know that we should on paper. We had a team member leave us from our Western Australian network to go to work with Edith Cowan University as a senior cyber warfare technician, effectively. So you imagine the tech skills that young lady has, and our IT department didn't know she existed. And they're the sorts of things that digitisation will enable us to do. So it is a bit of a full court press, but I think the last 12 months and the benefits that digital's given the business, and the regard that's been built up for the team that are driving the change, both within the technology teams, our IT and digital teams, but the appreciation that they have of the merchandising teams, the marketing teams, the operational teams, is driving more collaboration and more teamwork than perhaps we've ever seen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Steve, we've just heard from Mike about how CFOs have a loud voice. Keen to hear your thoughts on how you know whether or not you have the right culture in place.
Well, if we're going to play the CFO card now, then it's about the things you can measure, because we love measuring things, and they don't need to just be financial. So if I think about when WesTrac started to think about a shift in its culture, we looked at things like, what was our safety performance like? What was employee engagement like? What was attrition like? We are a service business. We repair people's equipment. So what was rework? What was, breakdown? How quickly was the equipment breaking down after we returned it to the customer? So there's a lot of different KPIs that we looked at, and we said, well, for our strategy to be successful, and if we want to grow the business to what we think the potential was, we couldn't have safety stats where they were. We needed to retain people. We needed people to be engaged. And we get those things right, then things like rework and the quality of the work that we do and the duration, or that mean time to failure extends out. So there was a clear, the KPIs were telling us a story that if we maintain those sorts of metrics, we're never going to be successful. And it was all people driven. So it was a pretty compelling case for us to shift the culture. The culture has shifted enormously, and I look at our safety stats. We're less than half of what our TRIFR was 3 years ago. Our attrition is down 30-odd%. Our rework is, again, that would be half of what it was. And then the other bit that we never ever see is when attrition's high in your recruiting, and our people are expensive to train. The technical skills that we need to, and training we need to put through, you just don't see that cost in it from a CFA perspective. You don't see it in a P&L, but it is hiding in there. And the other piece is, if you've got a lot of people leaving, we sell not just parts and machines, we're also selling hours. So our ability to sell more hours is due to us having people stay with us for longer and being able to grow our workforce, our team members. So you don't get the culture right, that any aspiration you have to grow your business and for us delivering shareholder value, it becomes very difficult with, as you say, Mike, a toxic culture. And we didn't have a toxic culture, but we didn't have a high-performing culture. And I think, and again, we'll use that lovely word journey, the journey we're on, we're certainly seeing the benefits of what we've put in place over the last 2 or 3 years has enabled the business to take advantage of the market opportunities that exist now. And we're very well positioned. And for the first time in the last 3 years, the number of people that we need is pretty much in balance with the number of people that we have, whereas there was a huge deficit. So getting that culture piece right enables the ability to deliver on those strategic aspirations.
And how did you do it, Steve?
How do we do it? Well, we recognise, Gabe, that whilst as an exec team, we all rated ourselves particularly highly, but I think we also recognised we needed help. We all had our day-to-day jobs, and it was one of those things that could be very easy to go at each exec meeting or each board meeting, go, we really need to do something about the culture. We took a very deliberate stand, and there was a number of people within our business that led that, both, and our business is WA and New South Wales, so the people in WA and people in New South Wales, through people and culture and through safety, that they put together a program. We got the Interchange, we got yourself involved with Escape, but we knew we needed a structured program. We knew we needed to have our content and not just have a consultant come in and run their slide deck with find and replace somebody else's brand with our brand. It was very, very tailored to our business, and we branded it Built by Us because it was a program built by us. And then we had, regular cadence. We measured, we tracked the performance of the program, but it was very, very structured. But we did recognise, we as an exec team knew we had to change the business, and we knew in ourselves we had to learn and grow. And I think Mike said, conscious and unconscious biases. We also talked a lot about fixed mindsets and growth mindsets, and when problems are being thrown up, we were very quick to go, no, you can't do that. We've tried that in the past, can never be done. but switching our mindsets from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset also helped us. But certainly working with yourself and the Interchange to help guide us, and the thinking was there, was how do we bring that together, and how do we get people to help us take the great knowledge and intellectual property throughout the business, but then have a program that could be rolled through. And it's been very, very successful through, go back to the CFO lens, through all the metrics that we said weren't where we wanted them to be, to where they are today. It's certainly been a very, very successful program. But it has taken, the exec team all had to buy into it, and it was that visual leadership that this was very important to us as an organisation. And we all were heavily involved in sponsoring the program. We were seen at workshops, at learning sessions. So it's been a really, really terrific program for us. And there's been certainly 4 key people within our business that, in terms of the heads of people and culture in both states and the heads of safety within both states, have been really passionate in driving and holding the rest of the ELT to account as well. It's been great, really, really great.
Now I've got questions firing at me left, right and centre from participants on here. So I'm gonna start with one, but I'm gonna come back to what Steve was just talking about there. So the first question for all of the panelists is, onboarding new employees has had to change during COVID. How have you helped new employees understand and immerse themselves in your company culture remotely? I might start with you, Katherine, if I could.
Yeah, sure. So it's been a funny, I think for all people teams in organisations, there was this kind of initial approach, which might have been, oh, this will be over soon, so we'll just kind of work our way around it. We resisted that and tried to continue to make sure that we started people with the organisation. A strength of our culture is it's actually naturally very welcoming of new people, and so we've leveraged that. But we have done tailored induction programs for each of our new people, which has been really time intensive, but making sure they're meeting and connecting with the right people, that IT is always a big thing, right? And some of them have only come onto a site to pick up their IT equipment in Victoria in particular. And so I think the connections have been the most important things, making sure that they're meeting with the right people. The line leaders are stepping up and taking huge amount of responsibility in navigating people through the organisation. And then together with all the what do you need to know about working here and online training and all of those pieces, that we've really dialed up the support around all of that. It's really time and work intensive, but we've found that it's helped us business continuity, so we're not carrying vacancies, we're pushing through. And for the most part, I hope people were reporting that they're having a good experience and they understand the context, and they're grateful that we've gone ahead with the offer and that they're able to begin to make a contribution.
And Katherine, would there be one particular tip or trick that you might be able to give for the people listening around how to make people feel particularly welcome when they start?
Yeah, I think the introduction to peers and time with peers is so one of the things, because we ask people, now that we've been going long enough, we ask people what's the thing that you found most difficult, and I think they do miss the coffee and the being able to more casually say, how does this work here? Or why does that person do that? And something that you would not ask in a WebEx meeting or on a Zoom call, excuse me, can someone just explain how this, but you would get with that anecdotal peer conversation. So actually tonight we've got virtual drinks with one of the executives that's joined the team, just with a small group of us, but hopefully creating an environment where she can say, you know, how that happened, why did that happen? And because I think that's the bit that is the big gap for people.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Mike, what are your thoughts? You've got 48,000 people that you're looking after at the moment. No doubt you've still got people who are coming into the business. How are you onboarding them differently from how you were before?
Yeah, and we've had, obviously, as our full year results showed, we had a strong second half of the financial year, which meant for our store teams, we've been recruiting, quite regularly. And fortunately, if I think back to when I started at Bunnings, you went and did an induction that was for 3 days in a facility, and you went out on the road with people and spent that time. A lot of our, fundamental induction moved online over the last couple of years. So a lot of the sort of framework pieces that help you understand the history of the company, the safety aspects, and some of the cultural pieces, are delivered in online modules. And for team starting in a store, the rest of the onboarding, physical distancing aside, has been quite normal. For our support teams, much harder, much more similar to what Katherine was explaining at CSIRO, and lots of virtual catch-ups, making sure that people land well. So when they start, all their technologies not only picked up from the office, but it's all working, it's all done. You've had IT people go to people's homes to help check that things are right, to make sure that they do feel they have the tools to do the job. And then it's really about connecting with senior colleagues for very informal catch-ups that, I think to that point around when you don't quite know what to ask or how to ask it, you don't want to do it on a Teams call where there's 100 people, but you very happily do it one-on-one. We do some random catch-ups with people that maybe are outside of our normal, divisional reporting lines and things like that. So there is that connection. We did pause a number of key leadership programs. One of the really important ones we run is a program called Leadership Orientation. It normally is semi-residential. It's now able to be done virtually, and we're going through and making sure that not only we're running versions of that, but we're making sure we've got the right executives talking to the right new leaders. And one of the things that we've realised we needed to be sensitive to is that a lot of people that are joining us have had a really tough period of time leading into it. They've come from an airline, or they've come from an industry that's absolutely been decimated by the pandemic, and the scars that come with that. There's a little bit of apprehension and nervousness of, am I going to be able to settle here and maybe build a career? So we've just had to make sure that there's some good support along with that to make sure people are onboarded really well. And it's going to be very interesting, when we can go back to the physical environment, because in some ways we're dealing with more of a version of ourselves at the moment, rather than perhaps the whole person, because you don't have that physical interaction. So, that's going to certainly bring its own challenges, I think, in terms of bringing people together to sort of integrate, because I guess at the end of the day, whilst we're getting a window into everyone's kitchen, study, laundry, bathroom, wherever the Zoom calls are taking place, it's really making sure that, when they're together, we've got the right framework for that engagement to only deepen and not sort of stay remote.
Mm. How about you, Steve? What has WesTrac needed to do to onboard people differently now than what you were before?
We didn't have a lot of our workforce that ended up going to a work from home arrangement. So it's predominantly the support areas. The online training piece, as you said, Mike and Katherine, we have had that in place for a while. I think, come back to the culture piece, one of the things that's evolved, and we did have a number of people that did start during the work from home period where they were handed their laptop and off they went. I think we were much more caring to make sure, yes, your laptop worked, but also the onboarding manager was far more caring around that onboarding process, knowing full well that there wasn't that daily touch point, and you're not just sitting there next to me or across the other cubicle where you can just pop your head over a screen and go, oi, what's going on here? So I think we've we've gone from being a little bit too lackadaisical at times with how we onboard people to putting in a far more concerted effort. And some of the feedback we've had from our new starters has been, wow, haven't started with an organisation where I get so much love and so much attention. So it's almost, and then we're sort of looking at ourselves in the mirror going, well, why haven't we been doing this in the past? And certainly with the new starters in my area, and now that we're all back in the office, we've got to make sure we don't lose that. We are a very friendly organisation, and it's not cliched and it's not all treacle and sugar. It is, people are just really, really nice and friendly anyway. So we do need to make sure that we don't lose those really good learnings over the last 6 months, and we really embed that into how we bring people on going forward, because it has been, it's been a really big benefit of COVID was to look at, geez, we actually don't do this so well, but faced with some adversity, it's funny how we're able to do it really well. So for us, it's been good.
Mike, Steve was speaking earlier about the financial implications of focusing on your culture, and largely spoke about it in terms of a positive lens. So you can look at a whole range of different metrics, and all of those metrics show improvement when you put a dedicated focus on that. Do you have any thoughts on the financial implications of focusing on your culture, positive or negative?
I think the saying that you get what you pay for, really stacks up. And I was, thinking that, really much front of mind when Steve was talking. We've got a really unique dynamic with our workforce. It's very different to, I'd say, most other retailers, even other retailers within our group. The vast majority of our team are permanent. 85% or so of our team are permanent. So there's that certainty of hours, certainty of income. Our EBA rates are more than 10% above the retail awards, which means we're investing, at an aggregate level, probably around 150 million a year into our team, not into the EBIT line. But the benefit is that we have very low team turnover. Our turnover of permanent team is around about 10% and has been for a long time. We've got a TRIFR that's down just around the 10 mark now, and that's steadily fallen over time. Which is a good indicator that team are physically safer at work, and we invest a lot more these days in broader well-being and welfare, so that you're psychologically safe at work as well. But that low turnover, I think retailers underestimate the incredible cost of doing business of churn. Losing someone, lost productivity. Hire someone new, you might have to pay recruiter fees. You've got to do those onboardings we were just talking about, and you lose momentum. So arguably, we're probably getting a significant multiple of that 150 million back in earnings through better productivity, better engagement, better customer service, selling more product. So I do think it's important, and it's all the little things that we do that are unique. It's quite funny. My uncle, for his whole professional career, was a senior scientist at CSIRO up in Wales, and I fondly remember being a little kid and going to the Christmas parties that were had every year in North Ryde, and we have those in our stores, for our teams and their families. Every year we give our teams a Christmas gift. We give them, and there's some pretty cool stuff that we've done over the years. We've done, branded Monopoly, we've done, security cameras, we've done, nice sets, all sorts of things. And we do that for a very, very large proportion of the team, all of our permanent team, and there's still something for the casuals as well. And this year, to say thanks to the team for what had been a pretty amazing year, our full-time team members got up to $2,000 as a thank you bonus. And when you think about the workforce we have, there's substantial investments in people. So we want to be able to recognise in a meaningful, tangible way our gratitude to our team, along with all the other things that we do. So come back to where I started. You get what you pay for.
And it's a pretty incredible way to feel valued when you get these types of thoughtful things given to you by your organisation. Mike, while I've got you, I've a question for you that's come from a couple of the audience members. The one here is, Bunnings has an older workforce. How have these more mature demographics impacted or influenced the culture, particularly in these disruptive times?
Yeah, it's an amazing position. Over 30% of our workforce is aged over 50. I've been happily saying that for many years since I've been at Bunnings, and I'll join that rank next year. But it is important. We've got team members who've got 20 years, 30 years, experience with us, and they joined us in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. They've built fantastic second careers. We've got retired judges, retired CEOs. We've got tradies who's decided they've had enough of being on the tools. We've had horticultural teachers from TAFE come and join us and work in our nurseries. It's an amazing fabric that we've got, and I think there's a really good balance around probably reassuring some of the younger team and giving them a perspective. They've certainly learned some great digital skills from some of their younger teammates, but it also comes with some risk. We've got all of our over 70s in Melbourne, and there's quite a few of them working from home or being paid to stay at home, because we understand the risk associated with COVID for people who are a little bit older. So, we've got to sort of try and strike a good balance with the team. But, I think it's never been a set policy. I think we get good recognition for what we do, but we've never sort of gone out and actively targeted. I think what we have inside our recruitment thinking is valuing the person and the contribution rather than necessarily targeting a particular skill set. And I think that's been a really good way. And I think for customers, nothing beats life experience, right? Like, it's one of the few benefits to getting older is you rack up more experience. You've seen different things and lived through different things, and they can provide advice and guidance to our customers, which I think has been incredibly valued while we've all spent so much time at home.
It seems that age is the hot topic of questions for you, Mike. So I'm going to throw one more at you before I do the collective last question. But here it goes. One of my fears is that the pandemic will reinforce a younger person culture, valuing stereotypically younger qualities of agility, technology, and physical health. I'd be interested in your perspectives about what older people offer to the culture.
Yeah, I think I certainly think that coming into the pandemic, most of us in industry were getting, peppered non-stop by a variety of consultants and experts on, the need to rely on data and analytics, and age and experience count for very little, and data and analytics count for a lot. I think, when a pandemic turns up and there's no playbook for it, good luck with your numbers. You do need experience. So I think there's been a reset of certainly in people that I think we need to balance both. There's absolutely no doubt that technology and information that we generate these days is going to really help inform thinking. But I do think that things that have come out of the pandemic in my mind are reconnection with your home, a reconnection with your family, a reconnection with your friends. We've not been able to travel. We've not been able to go out, particularly in Victoria. And we see it even in the other states. People are staying home more. They're still doing a lot more on their home. And, that to me says that experience is going to count for a lot going forward. So, but I do think health will be there. But I think older generations, clearly the numbers are strong. People are living for longer and living more healthily for longer. My one big fear out of the pandemic is that, a myopic focus on one particular ailment runs the risk of many others. Everyone talks about mental health, and those that know me know I'm passionate about that. But it's scary to hear that fewer people are being diagnosed with cancer than ever before. Fewer people are being diagnosed with heart disease than ever before. People are still getting sick. They're just not getting tested. And I do hope that the way out finds a balance around holistic health, because I think that's something that's going to be really important for all of us.
And Katherine, can I just get your thoughts on that as well? Because I know that that's actually a topic of discussion at CSIRO as well. You've got a plethora of knowledge in the more experienced members of your team. What are your thoughts on the concerns that people are putting forward about value of the older generation?
Yeah, it's interesting. Our culture really values the experience and the depth of knowledge and different type of career, I think, in many ways. And we have quite long lead cycles for research and maturation of programs. And so one of the ways that we create differentiation and relevance is by bringing together very special capabilities and people who are deeply experienced in doing particular types of work. And so that can take 20 years to develop that level of expertise. And so you're likely in some ways to be becoming more and more relevant as you go, and more important to certainly to CSIRO as you go. So there's a great respect and honour, and it's very age agnostic really in CSIRO. So I think there's a lot of respect for that. But I do think thinking about being able to be adaptable in terms of how people engage, and so I think that really resonates, and it's part of the diversity of the workforce more broadly. But it's not just relevant to be digitally adept, and in that, and so how do we bring all of those strengths together? I think that's what we're trying to do, and recognise that whether it's age or whether it's levels of experience, that all matters, and how do you bring that all together to make something that's, that couldn't be the same without each of those elements. But I think the health, I share Mike's concerns about health, and I think I was reading this morning just that GP visits are down, and a whole range of things that people are holding back, and not just in Victoria. So I think looking after, encouraging our workforces from an organisation perspective, encouraging our workforces to look after themselves, and that whole proactive health message, preventative health message, certainly one that we promote at CSIRO, kind of from an organisational perspective, but also for our workforce. So really important.
It's a really important message on Are You OK Day. Katherine, I've got a question that's coming to you from one of our audience. You talked earlier about the importance of listening, and we have a question on that. I'd love to hear more practical examples of how you are listening and actively creating the feedback loop.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Look, nothing that no one else has ever thought of, I don't think, but I talked about just having listening sessions where you're not trying to deliver content, but you are listening. We are quite obsessed with the chat function. We use WebEx at CSIRO, but we understand not everyone wants to speak up on these kind of calls. Not everyone's comfortable with that, but our people love chat. So we will openly say, please participate in the forum. You don't have to come on camera. Use the chat. We collect all of the chat information. We answer every question. If we see early warning signs, we reach out to those people proactively. We're trying to engage our leaders in a different way as well, to be change their meeting cadence, more frequent meetings, shorter duration, that kind of thing. Nothing I'm sure that no one else hasn't thought about, but I think it is partly leveraging the technology, but just creating space for people to share their thoughts. And so we have online forums, we have Yammer at CSIRO. So just we've tried to think of every way that people can have be heard, and when they do participate, taking action. So not just saying, oh, that's nice, so-and-so said something on Yammer, but it's like, oh, we heard you. Okay, what does this mean? Or say more about this. And so we're trying to make sure everyone gets a response, everyone's heard. And we've got some great ideas, obviously, as well, coming through.
That is
I reckon that's a
fantastic.
great
Thank
point,
you.
Katherine. it's one thing for something to go into your ear, but then what's the action, so that you truly know that you have been listened to, you have been heard. And it might mean something does happen, or it might mean something doesn't happen, but as long as we take that time to explain the why the decision was made, is hugely powerful.
I think if you can make it visible to everyone, and I think that's where technology does help, because if you get personal feedback, you can deal one-on-one, but if it's in a group, letting the group understand, and as you say, Steve, it's not it's not just what you can do, it's what you can't. I think closing that out's the active part of the listening process.
We've got another poll that's going to pop up on the screen now as we start to near the end of our discussion. And whilst that occurs, here it is. Has COVID-19 increased the focus on culture within your organisation? Yes, definitely, somewhat, no, or definitely not. So while we leave the audience to answer that, Steve, I have a question that has been put in for you, and it says, how did your structured culture transformation program align with 7 Group holdings? Was there a group-wide view of what WesTrac was trying to achieve?
Certainly. So 7 Group Holdings has a number of companies that it either owns wholly or has a controlling interest in. The program was introduced to us by a chap by the name of Murray Vitlich, who was formerly from Asiano, I think. And Murray sat on the board of Westtrack, but was also the COO of SGH. So I think it'd be fair to say that Westtrack was the first of the opcos to undergo the process, and I think it's now the success within Westtrack means it's going to be replicated across some of the other opcos as well. It certainly was. SGH is very shareholder return driven, so the metrics around, or the return on that investment was certainly interrogated. And I would say in terms of what SGH was looking for from the program, just on a basic payback, it would have, in terms of the cost of the program, payback period would have been less than, I reckon, less than 18 months, if not 12 months. But it has been, I'll go back to, it was hugely successful, and on the back of that success, it will be rolled out across the other opcos.
Thank you, Steve. We'll just have a quick look at the results of the poll that was just asked. Not too dissimilar to the last one. So still some very positive feelings around organisations focusing on culture throughout the COVID-19 period. Well, we're getting close to that's all we have time for, but in just one line, I'm curious to hear from all 3 of you the thing that you have learnt about yourselves as a leader in this time of COVID-19. Katherine, I might start with you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Gabe. Well, I tend to have a more introverted leadership style. I'm more of an introverted person, and so what I've realised is how much energy I get from my typical way of working, which is to spend lots of time in the field and with the people actually doing the work, and so I've missed that. But I've also realised as part of how I think about getting things done and success is observing them and seeing people doing things and seeing work come to life. And so it's been a real pivot for me to be able to think about what's happening in the organisation without being able to see it. And so there's that tangibility and finding my energy in different ways, because I have so much energy from actually sort of participating in things. And I think I've really got my energy from one, I think looking after myself a little bit better than I've spent, years on planes and So this has been an opportunity for me to be more sensible about how I spend my energy. So I've got some energy from that, but also just connecting with people in different ways. And I've also learned that I think for those that have a more introverted style, in this virtual world, you can actually disappear, and your impact as a leader can really be diluted. And so there is that proactive and very deliberate approach to making sure that you're involved, participating, communicating, and I have to make sure that I'm doing that, because standing back in the virtual world doesn't work as well. So I think there's some of the key things that I've learned.
Thank you, and thanks for being part of this discussion.
Thanks,
Steve. Steve, what have you learned about yourself?
I think similar to Katherine, not to lose touch with your team is hugely important, and it would have been very easy to just sit there and basically each email come in sitting at home become an email exchange, but keeping that contact. But the other thing is, we were, when it first as it was first coming to light, the situation and the response required, meant we were working enormous amounts of hours. So then trying to find some way to stay fresh and engaging and alert. So I was a bit like Katherine, no longer on planes, or no longer having to drive an hour or so to work or whatnot, but actually spending a little bit of me time and learning that I don't need to buy new surfboards regularly to actually improve my ability to surf. Actually just getting into the water regularly and having that fresh mind. I think with some of these problems, it's so easy to just go straight into, I'm just going to let it consume me, and to the exclusion of anything else. Keeping that balance with some of that non-work stuff was hugely important for me to keep a fresh mind and still remain engaged with my team.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. Mike, to you to close us out with the last comment. What have you learnt about yourself during this period?
Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to be a part. And it's been great to meet Katherine and Steve as well, and listen to their stories. It's been a really rewarding afternoon. But I think for me, it's reinforced the importance of relationships, because in an era where you can sort of joke about work from home has become living at work. You want those relationships. Isolation, forces a level of discipline into the connection. And I think the other part has been that we've seen that, we've moved into a world where the importance of government, the importance of experts and listening to experts has really shifted the landscape. And for a lot of business, government's there to sort of stamp paperwork and hopefully stay quiet and stay out of your way. And clearly, that's shifted. So those sorts of relationships and relationships with your peer businesses and others is important. But most importantly and paramount in my mind has been the relationship with our team and the connection with them. And I think it's been the reinforcement of that importance. And it's been lovely not being on planes. It's been lovely spending more time at home and seeing family. And it has been important to strike that balance. But the connection with the outside world, particularly for those of us living in Melbourne at the moment, is just so important, because I think on Are You OK Day, that sense of connection is never more important than it is now.
Thank you, Mike, and so grateful for your involvement in this discussion, and to the 250 of you who've taken the time to be with us for the past hour and a half and listen to Mike and Katherine's and Steve's stories. We're very grateful for your time. I can see that there's a whole lot of questions that we have not got around to answering, but we will get back to you on the blog and answer those questions, and I'll check in with our three panelists to answer anything that I can't answer. So thank you for that. So this is a culture discussion. Our next quarterly event will be coming out soon, and we'll let you know when that will be held. If you'd like to stay connected, you can follow us on LinkedIn or through Instagram. And what I took out of today was just the importance of sharing and taking the time to learn from each other, because we don't often, I think, give ourselves that space and opportunity. So for what I've learned today, thank you. And thank you to everybody for being a part of this. Stay safe, go well. It is Are You OK Day. So please check in with one another, make sure you're okay, or if you're not, work with one another to support each other and find help if need be. Thank you very much. Until next time.